This is section 2.7. This is part 5. We are solving inequalities. So far we've learned the addition property of inequalities, and we've dealt with that in isolation. And then we learned the multiplication property, and we dealt with that in isolation. So those are analogous to sections 2.1 with the addition property of equality, section 2.2 with the multiplication property of equality. Now we're going on to the analog of 2.3. We're going to be mixing the two properties together. The approach is exactly the same as with an equal sign. We just have to remember to not change it to an equal sign on accident, and also to flip the sign around if we end up needing to multiply or divide by a negative. Other than that, it is the same. All right, so let's look at this. If this were an equal sign, we would simplify both sides by combining like terms. That's exactly what we're going to do. We have 14x plus 7x, that would be 21x minus 6 is greater than 4 minus 10. We can combine those. We're going to have the 10x. 4 minus 10 would be negative 6. Okay. Now, technically, I need to get my x's together, and I can move either the 21x over here or the 10x over here. It works either way. You can't make a wrong decision. You can make a harder decision, though. If it is easy to make the number in front of your variable a positive number, do that. It's when you have a negative number in front of your x after you move everything together, that's when we have to divide by a negative. That's when we have to remember to flip the sign. So right here, if I subtract 21x from both sides, I'm going to get a negative over here in front of my x. I don't want that. I want to move this one over here. So I'm going to subtract 10x from both sides. Sometimes it's not going to be easy to avoid that, and you're just going to have to deal with it. But if you can avoid it, do it. I have 11x minus 6 is greater than, making sure I kept my sign, negative 6. Now I want to get my constants together. I want to get this thing alone. So I want to move this negative 6 over to here. So I add 6 to both sides. Now a lot of people panic right here. I'm going to come back over here and write. I have 11x. That cancels. This cancels, but it's actually 0. Technically, we say this cancels out and we don't write it because we're adding 0 or subtracting 0. And that doesn't change the 11x at all. But I need something over here. So 11x is greater than 0. Okay? Now I need to divide both sides by 11. Don't let the 0 freak you out. Divide both sides by 11. And you get x is greater than 0 divided by 11 is 0. You are allowed to have a 0 in the top. You are not allowed to have it in the bottom. I need to put a 0 on my graph. Put in some extra numbers if you want. My variable is on the wide side of the sign. So I shade to the right. Or think of plugging in some numbers. 1 is greater than 0, 2 is greater than 0, negative 1 is not, negative 2 is not. We shade the direction where it's true. Now I need to put something on the 0. This is simply greater than, no equal to involved, so this is parentheses. So parentheses, shading to the right, that's part of your answer. That's your answer to the graph part. Interval notation, your left-hand boundary is 0 with the parentheses because we decided that went here. Comma. This one goes up forever in the positive direction, so it's positive infinity with parentheses. Okay, this problem. 2x minus parentheses 4x plus 3 less than 6x plus 3 times x plus 4. If this is an equal sign, we have distributions to do. To simplify it, that does not change. Remember, that's a negative 1 there. So we have to remember to distribute a -1 through here, which is going to change both signs. Here I need to distribute a +3. So I have 2x, -1 times 4x will be -4x, -1 times 3, -3, is less than 6x, +3 times x is +3x, 3 times +4, that's a +12. Okay, now let's combine like terms here and here. 2x minus 4x, that's -2x, minus 3 is less than 6x plus 3x, that's 9x, plus 12. Okay, now this is going to be easier if I can get the number in front of my x to be a positive number. If I subtract 9x from both sides, I'm going to have a negative over here. So I am going to choose to move this over to here. So plus 2x plus 2x. This is -3 is less than 11x plus 12. Now let's get that 12 away from the 11x by subtracting 12 from both sides. And I get -15 is less than 11x. Okay. Now I need to divide both sides by 11 to get the x alone. I do not have to flip the sign because I divided by a positive number. It did not matter that that was negative. So rewriting right here, I have -15/11 is less than x. You don't need to do anything with this. I forgot to draw in the graph here, so let's draw our own number line. Sorry about that. I'm going to put -15/11 here. Now, if you've memorized to think, if you've decided to memorize which side you're on, this is on the wide side of the sign. So I'm going to shade to the right. If you had learned it where you shade the direction that it points, here your variable is on the right-hand side, it points to the left, so it's backwards. This is what I meant by don't use that trick if that's what you were taught. Okay, now, if you didn't memorize this and you want to plug in some numbers, but you don't really want to figure out what this is, you don't have to go up by ones. This is a negative number. I know a 0 is somewhere over here. -15 divided by 11, that's, that's somewhere between -1 and -2. But even if you don't want to do that, you could put, say, -100 over here. You know it's not that far negative. Now think of these two numbers. Which one works? This is not bigger than this, but a 0 is always bigger than a negative number. So we shade to the right. Okay? What goes on this sign right here? This is just a less than, so this is parentheses. So parentheses and shade to the right. For interval notation, what is your left-hand boundary? It is -15/11. What is your right-hand boundary? Infinity. They both get parentheses. You can also flip these around completely. Now this messes some people up, which is why I don't teach it this way. So if this confuses you, just pretend I never said it. This is exactly the same thing as x is greater than -15/11. This moves to the left, this moves to the right, your sign flips around. Whichever way you end up learning it is good.